Hello indie game fans, I polled you and you asked for it, so here are the best upcoming indie games in September, where it is a ridiculously stacked month since September and October are prime times to be releasing your game. So let's begin with Jump King Quest, the follow-up to a Rage game that hilariously describes itself as a tactical leaping adventure in which the sequel adds multiplayer which seems like pure
chaos,
as well as combat, strangely enough. Also ditching the pixel art for 3D character models. Interestingly, you do seem to have a little bit more control over the character, but not by much, where I'm sure that failure will result in you falling down many screens, where I love seeing innovations in this space, so of course this is of interest. I've had my eye on Project AHNO's Arc for a little bit, since it is an anime turn-based tactics roguelite, but instead of drawing upon chess as inspiration, this instead uses Go or Wei Ti as its base, in which surrounding an enemy or groups of enemies with your units will cause the entire group to get destroyed. There are also boss fights, random events, and RPG progression, and like Jump King Quest, is an alternate take on the formula. This video is brought to you by Necroking, a turn-based tactics roguelite in which you play as a master necromancer, raising the dead and using them to conquer settlements which are desecrated by the presence of life itself. The living have gone mad and begun to look for reasons to fight, so bring order back to the world by crushing your enemies in real-time tactical gameplay which requires strategic decision making and quick reflexes. There's also a deck building element in which you choose from over 30 undead minion types, and you can customize your strategy through unlocking new skulls and unit skill upgrades, along with RPG progression systems as you level up the Death Monarch himself. Being a roguelite, there are procedurally generated level layouts which results in variety in every run, all wrapped up with a beautifully done, minimalist but effective pixel art graphics, so wishlist the game and pick it up when it releases on September 4th, 2024. This next title is from a technically independent studio, but according to LinkedIn, they have more than 100 employees, which is why it comes with an asterisk, and this is also being published by Xbox. But if you ever wondered what happened to the developers of The Banner Saga after releasing their last title in 2018, well, now you know with Towerborne. This self-describes as an action-adventure game, but looks like a beat-em-up brawler with RPG elements to me, with co-op support for up to 4 players and is set in a fantasy world. You and your friends must fight off the monsters to save humanity, pushing back against a deadly curse that sees the titular tower becoming the last bastion of humanity. I like the gorgeous, almost cel-shaded art style, but there are some factors that concern me. Firstly, it will be an early access release on Steam and then goes to Xbox and Game Pass in 2025, but is being targeted as a live service game with seasonal content and an evolving world map, which is perhaps Destiny or Fortnite-like in nature. As such, player population might be a big concern, and the split release doesn't make sense to me, and it is not easy getting a game like this off the ground. See the release of Blightbound as an example of how things can go wrong, so I'm not liking their chances, but best of luck to the developers. The fantasy life sim RPG Mirthwood has quickly shot up the charts in terms of anticipation, which I believe is due to what seems like a bunch of stuff to do, set in a medieval fantasy world, and borrows elements from farming sims, life sims, and action RPGs. You play as your own custom character, trying to make their way in the world, choosing from a variety of character backgrounds to start the game. There are survival elements in which hunger is a mechanic, so you have to forage and gather resources, survival game style, and then to use these to craft equipment and weapons, eventually being able to own your own home to farm and develop. There is real-time combat, so we'll have to see how in-depth the systems are, but you can dodge roll, so it is a little bit more involved. Of course, there are quests to go on and decisions to make, along with NPCs to befriend, and also has an almost Fallout-like perk system in the form of skill cards as you develop your character. If that wasn't impressive enough, every NPC is fully simulated and has their own desires and personalities in an almost colony sim kind of fashion, which seems impressive. You can also venture out into the wilds to explore and do battle, with perhaps something evil lurking out there in the woods, looking like quite the promising title that you can sink hours and hours into. Here's a fun-looking, light-hearted title named Critter Cove, an open-world live sim town-building game set in the cozy post-apocalypse. You are restoring an old town, cleaning up the trash, and freshening up the buildings in order to attract new residents and tourists to the island. The life sim aspect includes farming, fishing, foraging, and exploration, with the last item including some 3D platforming aspects, along with the expected museum, friendships with NPCs, and so much more, and does not appear to have any combat elements, so it's a full-on cozy game, although I'm sure that it will be dismissed by some as furry My Time at Portia, but I think that there's something here worth a look. I've covered the Slavic mythology Metroidvania Marko Beyond Brave a number of times, since I think there's promise to this hand-drawn Metroidvania, in which our hero battles against entropy by adventuring through the world and taking on enemies and bosses. The huge, interconnected map is what appeals to me, since it promises hundreds of rooms and secrets to uncover, where exploration and discovery is the most important part of games to me, and this looks to have plenty of that. Combat looks like a focus as well, with some impressive art and animations, and we don't have to wait long since it releases next month. I've been looking forward to this next title for a little while, since the rhythm JRPG Keylocker comes to us from the developer of Virgo vs the Zodiac from 2019, a hidden gem of a game that kind of went under the radar since it released in December, which is never a good idea. But this pixel art title, set in a cyberpunk authoritarian city, sure looks impressive and appears to have great music. You play as a singer-songwriter in a world where music is banned, and of course, will come to serenade the revolution against the powers that be. While it doesn't have the most impressive high-bit pixel art, and does have kind of a strange colour palette, I guess that is what makes this game stand out, looking otherworldly and pretty distinct as a result. There's also quite a bit of variety in gameplay, from Mario and Luigi RPG-style turn-based combat with active button presses, and where positioning on a tiny hexagonal grid matters as well. In addition, there are also straight-up Guitar Hero-style note highway rhythm game sections, as well as more action-oriented bullet hell sequences as well, making it quite the curiosity, not to mention the absolutely insane character designs, which are very unique. Our main character also has at least 4 different classes to play as, with each apparently having their own unique skill trees and storylines, and also has multiple endings, so it looks like a lot of work went into this and is a must-get for JRPG fans. Another long in development title also makes it to release in Elsie, a pixel art roguelike platformer in which you are blasting through hordes of robots using a variety of weapons, where my main concern is that there's so much going on screen at any one time, but hey, in the developer's own words, you need to embrace the chaos. What is contributing to the hectic amount of action on screen are the presence of little droids that will follow you around, which fire their own projectiles in a manner similar to Neon Abyss, but the attack animations in terms of color, lighting, and particle effects results in an explosion of color and light, but underneath all of that is some pretty great pixel art with, critically, outlines for characters and enemies that help them stand out from the background objects, and looks to be a pretty good one of these. While I'm not usually a horror game person, even I have to marvel at the sick, twisted minds of the developers from Clapperheads, since they have warped what is one of the more common experiences for parents into one of the most horrifying experiences in Zoochosis, where there are mutant animals which take on all sorts of horrible forms. Somehow, you play as the zookeeper and have to take care of said creatures, both normal and mutant, keeping them satisfied while you work on a cure, with the whole game being presented as a very first-person sim kind of fashion, so think House Flipper for example, with the added horror element giving it a deliciously macabre twist. The follow-up to Void Bastards from 2019 is appropriately named Wild Bastards, adding in a space western theme to this first-person roguelite strategy shooter. The art style looks similar to their first game, which has that comic book look, but more interesting is its own description of itself. The first game had you playing as disposable prisoners sent to explore derelict spaceships for supplies and to ultimately escape the nebula, with this instead placing you in charge of a notorious band of outlaws on their exploits through the galaxy. The original had almost immersive sim elements with regards to how you could tackle problems, and explicitly stated that it was inspired by Bioshock and System Shock 2, but they did not go with roguelite im-sim for this, but rather roguelite strategy shooter, which is curious. You're able to recruit and play as different characters, also having to manage interpersonal relationships between them as you make your way across procedurally generated galactic sectors, and looks awesome. I think that first-person driving games have their place, especially when you just want to zone out to and listen to a podcast or think about things in an almost meditative kind of way, and with Euro Truck Simulator and American Truck Simulator covering large parts of the Earth, how about a trip into space instead in Star Trucker? There's some sort of strange mass appeal to this space trucker game since it has a ton of Steam wishlist, where it seems like you're kind of doing the same thing, hauling cargo from one space station to the next, using the intergalactic highways and getting intimately familiar with your big rig, where I do wonder how calming this will be since you're swapping endless miles of farmland and countryside with the wide expanse of space. But again, it's a new idea, so I'm down for this. I find it quite funny that if you look at the list of most wishlisted upcoming games on Steam, among the heavy hitters like Silksong, Monster Hunter Wilds, Path of Exile 2, Slay the Spire 2, and Light No Fire, there is a little game that is not like the others named Tiny Glade, a title that is not even a game really, but more of an interactive toy, following in the footsteps of Townscaper, which allows you to create tiny medieval dioramas without any specific objective or points or score or win-lose conditions, simply allowing you to doodle and mess around with it. This latest trailer really shows off how gorgeous it is, especially with the lighting, and instead of taking place in the void like in Townscaper, there are environmental objects that will react to your cursor, such as ducks and sheep, while not directly affecting the building in any way. Still, like Star Trucker, this looks to be very pleasant and chill, so get this to relax. The pendulum swings wildly across the spectrum of indie games, since a title which is not super cozy is Hollowbody, a survival horror title with a tech noir vibe. You play as a shipper, a smuggler of sorts, whose partner has gone missing 12 days ago, and your only clue is that she has ended up in the exclusion zone, a 20-mile area sealed off by walls after the collapse, having to face your fears, find her, and to get out. I'm no horror game expert, but this looks to be more Silent Hill than Resident Evil to me, having the expected resource scarcity, inventory management, some action, as well as the use of fixed camera angles, although that last one is mixed with dynamic camera movements as well. It looks pretty well made and will beat Silent Hill 2 Remake to the punch, so horror fans will be eating good for the next 2 months. Hey, what do you know? The pendulum swings back the other way again with Caravan SandWitch, a beautiful exploration adventure game which is all about a journey as our heroine makes her way across vast landscapes in a van searching for her sister. This is an exploration game through and through with no combat, no death, and no timers, so you are free to roam, explore, and figure out what is going on, with the progression systems in the form of upgrades for your van, which allows you to access new areas. Like Dungeons of Hinterberg from July, the art style here stands out and has a self-described hopeful post-apocalypse and looks to provide warm, cozy vibes if you're sorely in need of that like me. Another developer which is technically independent but is from a larger team of about 50 people is Italian studio Gemma Games, having previously made mobile titles and worked probably in an assistive capacity on games like Cyberpunk 2077, Dying Light 2 and Ghost Recon Wildlands, and now they have turned their attention to making a Souls-like RPG named Enotria: The Last Song. It's a gorgeous looking title and is infused with Italian folklore, which is not as common as you might think in games as compared to the now more common Slavic myths and legends. The world is enraptured by a twisted eternal play that keeps everything in stasis, and you as the maskless one has the ability to free the world, choosing between 30 plus different types of masks, which grants you different abilities in order to do so. I'm guessing that this is a tribute to Venetian masks, with the Italian summer and colours being very different to the grim-dark gothic environments that we are used to for this genre, which makes it interesting, so I hope that they nail the gameplay portion, since many have attempted to ape FromSoft to varying levels of success. Hot off the press from Gamescom 2024 is the news that Farah: The Sundered Tribes will be releasing in early access next month, the next game from developer Massive Damage, creator of Halcyon 6 and Star Renegades, but they have left their pixel art roots behind to make a 3D survival action RPG. You are hunting down giant monsters, Monster Hunter style, tactically targeting limbs and body parts to attack to strategically weaken it so that you can get the materials that you need to progress. In addition to crafting equipment, there's also a village building and tribe management aspect, so the town portion of the game is a lot more involved and is not just filled with vendors, wrapped up with a gorgeous art style, and has aerial traversal and combat as a focus and looks like fun. The developer of Chef RPG has a huge YouTube channel named Pixel Architect, which gives them an immediate advantage over other pixel art farming life sim titles, with the main twist here being that you are not a farmer, but rather a chef and a restaurant owner that wants to grow your culinary empire. You do so by going out into the world to forage for ingredients, hunt animals and catch fish, using these to create your culinary masterpieces through little mini-games cooking mama style. There's also a management aspect of having to determine the layout of the restaurant, from customer seat placement to placing down your cooking equipment. Of course, you can form relationships with the townspeople, and yes, you will eventually get to farm and grow your own fruit trees and vegetables, so the core appeal is there and might just be the next big thing in this genre. It will be an early access release, which is planned for 1.5 years, but the launch version should already have a bunch of content, including 3 main story acts, 2 restaurants to manage, 240 recipes, and many of the core systems, so I wouldn't worry too much about the early access label. Another highly anticipated title makes it to launch in Demon School, a turn-based tactical JRPG with an art style that mixes hand-drawn cutscenes and portraits, pixel art sprites, and even 3D polygonal models for environments and bosses. There is a time management aspect, since your heroes are university students but have to balance uni life with fighting big weirdos in between the human and demon worlds, with a very interesting momentum-based, grid-based combat system, so check out their Steam page for a detailed explainer video on how that works, with the cherry on top of the cake being that this is releasing on Friday the 13th. This next title absolutely exploded during the most recent Steam Next Festival, showing how important the event can be for indies, and also, it is more of a combination of previous ideas that worked, rather than really doing anything fresh or innovative, which is not necessarily a bad thing, since they managed to create quite the compelling product in Drill Core, so I'm not complaining. This mixes a mining simulation building title like Oxygen Not Included, as you send miners deep into the earth to gather resources, but by night, swarms of monsters attack your base from above, so you need to construct towers and defenses to shoot them down, in a manner not unlike Dome Keeper, although it's on a different scale. As such, it mashes together 2 of the best games and ideas into something really quite impressive, and I'm confident that this will be a hit. This next title appeals to me for a number of reasons, not least because of the gorgeous pixel art, but also the mixing of elements from different genres into something of note, with Bloomtown a different story, also having a pretty great pedigree in terms of developer. This is a pixel art turn-based RPG with an almost Stranger Things style vibe, but with a 1960s Americana theme where you play as young kids looking into mysteries surrounding the town, helping to save the townspeople from the demonic creatures that live in their hearts. In addition to the turn-based combat, which includes summoning of giant creatures, there's also a farming/life sim element as the kids run around town to help people, tending to their garden or even to go fishing. Oh, and did I mention that you can capture said demons as well, adding a monster taming aspect similar to Shin Megami Tensei, and comes to us, at least in part, from the developer of Graveyard Keeper, so I have high expectations for this. I'm a noted fan of the Heroes of Might and Magic series, one that combines overworld exploration, castle building and turn-based combat on a grid with stacks of units, and various indie developers are fans as well, since they have been making their own spiritual successor such as Songs of Conquest, and the next game in this space is Silence of the Siren. Evidently, this is sci-fi instead of fantasy, although it does still have a wyvern looking thing or two, with this new trailer showing off some of the castle building that fans of the series know and love. So let's see what else is new, with this, interestingly, coming to us from the developer of Project Hospital of all games, but I'm totally down for this.
Welcome to the land of Mojo.
A game which was delayed out of 2023 was The Plucky Squire, and they have made good on their promise of releasing in 2024. And is interesting since it looks like a colourful, cartoony Zelda-style action-adventure game set in the pages of a storybook, but then comes the twist that our hero can escape the book and pop out into 3D, which then becomes a 3D platformer, although you're still able to interact with the 2D world, which looks amazing. It has a little bit of that Mario Odyssey vibe in the 3D sections, with the switch into 2D sections along certain walls, and easily looks like a hit.
Off the page and into adventure.
Number 3 goes to the new third most wishlisted game on Steam, which is just behind Silksong and Space Marine 2, where Frostpunk 2 is the sequel to a runaway success of a game from 2018. But it's also one of those that comes with an asterisk, since Polish developer 11-Bit Studios is technically independent, but LinkedIn has them at 317 associated members working on multiple projects like The Altars and this game, and also having an active publishing arm for other games, so this is by no means a small operation. So, with that being said, the survival city builder set in the frozen post-apocalypse still looks awesome, where the gut-wrenching decisions that you had to make was a hallmark of the first game, which I'm sure will return here as well. You will also be able to build larger cities and have more in-depth systems with regards to factions and people, a city council and politics to be concerned about, with both a story and sandbox mode looking to be the next big thing in this genre. Again, satisfactory comes with an asterisk, since this is from Coffee Stain Studios, which is now under the Embracer Group banner, but this first-person factory builder is awesome and I cannot wait for the 1.0 release. At the time when it released in early access, which was Epic Games Store first if you remember, this was the first big game that took Factorial but made it first person, with a bunch of others that have followed suit but none as big as this, in which you are gathering resources, using these to build machines and conveyor belts to automate resource gathering so that you can gather and refine more materials to build bigger and better machines, and on it goes. Among other updates, the 1.0 release will allow you to flush the toilet in the hub area, so yep, it's that kind of wacky that players love this game for, on top of the excellent factory building elements, and could easily be Game of the Year for many. Alright, it should be no surprise that this game is where it is, or rather these games, plural, since UFO 50 was announced back in 2017 and was planned for release in 2018, and yes, 6 years later, it is finally here. The developers of Spelunky, Downwell, Time Barons, Madhouse and Catacomb Kids are the ones working on this collection of 50, yes, 50 games, and hey, who knew that making 10 games each would take a lot of time? Critically, While it evokes those multi-game cartridges from days past, these are not mini-games or simple reskins and clones of other titles in the package, but rather full, standalone, unique games in themselves, where among the adventure games and arcade titles, there are full open-world games as well as JRPGs, each taking multiple hours to beat. So I don't think that they're messing around when it comes to the games they made. Of course, I cannot guarantee that the quality will be uniformly good across all the games, but it is still quite the accomplishment that this got made, also having a meta-narrative about a fictional 1980s video game company that created all of these titles, so maybe there's an interesting narrative thread to tug on as well. But for how insane of a project this is, I have to give it its dues. Watch this video for a ranking of the best pixel art games.